Resident Evil 4 is one of the best games in history. Resident Evil 4 Remake still is. Kinda. Let me explain.
I remember when I first played Resident Evil 4 back in 2006. I had just watched a zombie movie. I don't remember which one exactly, but I do remember thinking, hey, I feel like playing something scary. So I went to the video store with my dad, determined to find something that would fit what I was looking for. And there it was, Resident Evil 4. Since it was the obvious choice, I rented it and I brought it home to play. And oh boy, I didn't know what I was in for.
Resident Evil 4.
So I put the game in the console, and in the first few hours of gameplay I remember always being tense, expecting to get scared at any corner.
But the jumpscare never came. Instead, I received this.
And you see, I went to Resident Evil 4 looking for a horror game, but what I found was an action game with touches of horror. The action was so addictive that the only thing I could do after finishing Resident Evil 4 was
start a new game.
But let's go back to the present. When Capcom announced a remake of Resident Evil 4, I remained skeptical. Of course, I was excited about it, but I couldn't imagine how they could make this remake surpass the expectations I had for the original. And yes, I know that Resident Evil 2 Remake did an excellent job, but the original Resident Evil 2 was a much slower game with more room for improvement.
Resident Evil 4 is different.
Resident Evil 4 is a game that reinvented the third-person action genre. It set the industry standard for the years to come, and if you don't believe me, here's an example. All these games couldn't exist without Resident Evil 4. And the thing is, Resident Evil 4 was born out of a creative need to change Resident Evil. Since 1996, the series has always been tied to the technical limitations of the time. Even on the PS1, Shinji Mikami, the director of the first game, wanted to create a horror game with smoother action, but the limitations of Sony's machine didn't allow them to go further. In the end, they ended up using tank controls, which were characteristic of the gameplay in the series, but were merely a workaround due to the inability to create the game they had in mind. From the very birth of the series, they had the idea of renewing the controls, but Resident Evil became so popular with the first game that changing the gameplay so drastically would have angered a large part of the fanbase. And that's why when Mikami and his team took on the challenge of revitalizing the series with Resident Evil 4 in 2004, there could be no half measures. It had to be a turning point. It had to be
a revolution.
And boy, did they succeed! The game, despite its detractors, like any work that dares to break the mold, has rightfully become one of the most influential games in history, ported to all systems since its release and an undeniable inspiration for hundreds of titles released afterwards. And that's why you will understand my surprise when, after finishing Resident Evil 4 Remake for the first time, the only thing I could do was
start a new game.
The first hour of Resident Evil 4 Remake is enough to get an idea of what you can expect from the game. We start in a familiar area, the cabin, which in the original version already wanted to play a bit of a trick on you, making you think it's scarier than it actually is. In the remake, the trick is the same, but with a bit more depth. Those of us who played the Resident Evil 2 Remake and saw the trailers for the Resident Evil 4 Remake weren't 100% sure if it would lean towards action or horror. That's why this first part maintains the same intrigue, still playing with you. The beginning is slower, more terrifying, darker. For a moment, it seems like Capcom has truly dared to change the tone of Resident Evil 4. But just like in the original, this illusion lasts only a few minutes of gameplay.
Specifically, it lasts until we reach the village.
The village, just like the 1-1 level of Super Mario, is one of those levels that deserves to be studied. In the original, this level served many purposes. To make it clear that Resident Evil had changed, as a statement of the game's tone, and as a tutorial. The area features one of the best level designs in the industry. All the houses structures are placed in a way that creates small corridors, ensuring that you always find an escape route when you are cornered and that the action keeps flowing towards the center of the map. This action can take place both indoors and outdoors, with different levels of verticality. The village is designed to make you feel completely overwhelmed by the enemy, in constant tension, but at the same time, you always see a way to save the situation, to find an exit, to find a way out. There are also certain resources scattered around the map that you can collect, like the shotgun or grenades, which make you feel like you're improvising with everything you have. When you run out of pistol bullets, you find a shotgun, you move to another building, find more resources, now you're surrounded, you look for a new path, but luck, it's blocked, you look for another path, you don't know how, but you manage to get away for the moment. You're always on the edge, but there's always something you can do. It's an action that leaves you exhausted, frenetic and addictive, but demanding and engaging.
And just when you think you know what's Resident Evil 4 about, it reveals its true nature.
In less than 10 minutes, without saying a word, the village teaches you everything you need to know about Resident Evil 4. The game wants to keep you in tension with action that never stops flowing, where you need to be constantly active, improvise, move around the environment, and when you start feeling comfortable in the chaos, that's when the real challenge begins. And after that...
Well, after that we have the best one-liners in the history of video games.
No thanks, bro. Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Resident Evil 4 only needs 10 minutes to convince you. After the village encounter, there's no turning back. You are already in.
Fortunately, the village in Resident Evil 4 Remake serves exactly the same purpose. The game is similar enough for you to feel the familiarity, but also different enough to keep surprising you, to keep it fresh. The level maintains its structure for the action to flow towards the center, but the environment is slightly bigger, a bit more open. Some paths are still there, but others have changed so that you don't feel safe if you have played the original. There are still resources, yes, the shotgun is still where we left it, but others are in different places, like the shotgun shells that were in the tower. It's time to improvise again. It's time to search for another alternative. This initial contact with the game serves as a tutorial for newcomers, but at the same time, it's also a statement of intent for the regular players. It not only teaches you the new pace of the game, but also shows you what has changed compared to the original. The enemies are still the same, but now, to adapt to the new arsenal moves, they are faster and more aggressive. You can feel the familiarity of the environment and at the same time be surprised by small changes. But don't get too comfortable because you'll have to improvise to get out of situations that seem impossible at first. And just like in the original, when you start feeling comfortable in the chaos of battle, you are wrong again. When you stop to analyze the differences between the remake and the original, that's when you begin to see the tremendous design work behind the remake. If the development team had simply adapted the game to current standards with updated controls, Resident Evil 4 Remake would have been a failure, because there's a lot of manual adjustment work here. In the original, we always felt overwhelmed by the situation. It was us against a horde of creatures ready to kill us. We couldn't move and aim at the same time, so taking the time to aim left us vulnerable to enemies. We experienced a constant sense of tension in every encounter. In the remake, we can move and aim at the same time. Leon is faster, more agile, and the action is more fluid. However, we still feel the same sense of vulnerability and tension, because at the same time, the enemies are more agile and aggressive. They work together to surround you and always try to find your blind spots. The action is balanced once again, and not to meet the industry standards, but to recreate the sensations of the original,
to recreate the essence of Resident Evil 4.
And that essence is about always pushing you a little further. It's about forcing you to give a bit more of yourself. It's an action sequence without rest, constant tension, frenzy and improvisation. While you're aiming at one of the many granados coming at you, you have to keep an eye on controlling the whole group so they don't get too close. Find an alternative route to move through the environment. Make sure you don't run out of ammo. Play with different weapons depending on the type of enemy. Dodge the projectiles they throw at you. And all of this without breaking a sweat in the process. It's an addictive and challenging action with the best taste of B-movie that we can imagine. And we can see this in a multitude of situations. It's a DNA of the game. In the assault on the cabin, after dealing with a horde of enemies with banter worthy of your brother-in-law for 10 minutes, just when you think you must be close to the end, There it is, the extra posh. Would you think the chainsaw guy is the worst thing that can happen to you? Well, yeah, good luck. Now there are two. There's always another level to overcome. There's always a need to improvise once again.
And it always has to be done with style. And that's where Leon's comes in.
It's no secret that the success of Resident Evil 4 is partly thanks to the charisma of its character.
Okay, well, who am I kidding? It's thanks to Leon. It's thanks to Leon. Leon is Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is Leon.
It's not that he's a particularly well-written character, but he also has charisma from every pore. From his design with his iconic haircut and aviator jacket, to his one-liners that leave more than one villain speechless. This mix of edgy, cool, and super soldier makes it impossible not to fall in love with the character. All these qualities were already present in the original, but on top of that, in this new remake, controlling him is more satisfying than ever. With hundreds of small contextual animations, more agile movement, new witty responses, and a mode exclusively focused on his haircut.
Seriously, look at this.
Resident Evil 4 is Leon, and Leon is Resident Evil 4. It's something that has transcended the franchise itself. There are two concepts that can never be separated. Leon. But the charm of the game doesn't only come from its characters, but also from the varied and surreal situations it presents to us. It teeters on the edge of the comedy and the craziest moments of B-movie action cinema. The game tells us the story of a cult in the village in Spain that kidnaps the daughter of the President of the United States as their master plan to dominate the world? Seriously, who wrote that? Yes sir, this is art! It's completely absurd. Resident Evil 4 doesn't take itself too seriously, and thanks to that we have some of the most surreal and iconic scenes in the industry. The combat in the middle of a burning cabin with the 3-meter tall major who transforms into some sort of centipede, the first encounter with the regenerator where we realize we're really screwed, a section on the minecart where we have to shoot enemies while dodging obstacles along the way, and of course the American. What is American doing in the middle of a village full of infected in the middle of nowhere? It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter. It's perfect. It's pure Resident Evil 4. Seriously, it's iconic. Resident Evil 4, both the remake and the original, is iconic. And the thing is, these are two games so well crafted that one doesn't replace the other, but they form a whole, two different ways to enjoy the experience.
The best thing about Resident Evil 4 Remake is that now we can enjoy Resident Evil 4 in two different ways. And that's something that has exceeded all the expectations I have had for the title. Okay guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, just consider to subscribe to the channel. That would make me really happy. So that's it, see you in the next video. Hasta luego!